Are you happy? Are you deep down satisfied with the person you are, how you're living your life, and the future as it appears today? Do you have a passion? Is there any one thing in your life that is so important that it makes prioritizing everything else simple? If the answer to any of those questions is no, do you have any idea why? Welcome to the Verimour Speaks podcast. I'm your host, Dawn Keegan, co-founder of the dating app Verimour and the nonprofit app Hero Harbor. Happiness, mine and that of others, is something that's always been very important to me. I've devoted my life to understanding how we take the things life throws at us and combine that with our own special gifts to come away with an experience that, while not always perfect, is one we are proud of and allows us the fewest regrets and least amount of heartache. Whether through my personal musings or conversations with guests, the aim here is not to find a one-size-fits-all to-do list of change, but instead a mindset that lessens our fear, reduces judgment of ourselves and others, and frees each individual to build the life that truly represents happiness for them. Thank you for joining us on the Verimour Speaks podcast. I've always worked to provide the most honest, helpful content I could in forms that reach the largest possible audience. And my extreme dislike of greed-driven organizations means I do so without ads or sponsors. But for us to continue improving with better guests and more consistent production quality, we need your help. If you have found any value in what we do and the content provided, please show us a little love by making a contribution directly to the podcast or as a tax-deductible donation on the heroharbor.org website. Thank you again for listening, and please enjoy the show.
Out of suffering have emerged the strongest souls.
Welcome back. This evening we are speaking with Marine veteran Lorne Moon. Welcome, Lorne.
Thank you.
I am so glad to have you here. Once again, a Marine, and I have to apologize because I keep saying, we're Marine heavy, but the Marines show up. Everybody else says, oh yeah, I'd love to do this, but the Marines show up. So this is a call out to you guys to get off your butts and let's get recorded and get these stories. So thank you, Devil Dog. So we were talking just a second ago before we started recording about inter-service rivalry and things like that. And something that, because I went my DINFOS, Defense Information School, I was public affairs. And so it was a joint service school. And so there was, all of the hazing and razzing and whatever. But, you would just finish saying that, I'll let you tell your story again here in just a second. But one of the things that was always said to me is, well, I would have joined the Marine Corps, but I couldn't fit my head in the jar. It's like, so anyway. So one of the first things I always ask people is, how did you end up in the Marine Corps? How did you end up in the military, period? And then how did you choose the Marine Corps?
Actually, I had two uncles that had served during Vietnam. One did 2 tours in Nam as a Marine Corps grunt, and the other one was a jet mechanic with the Air Force. During high school, I had gone into electronics, and I thought, you know what, maybe if I'm good enough at this, I can maybe get myself a scholarship, good at, MIT, someplace like that. And obviously I did very well in the lab, sucked in the classroom. So that was not my career path.
Right.
And of course, you know how it is when you're in your junior or senior year, you got all the branches that come and career day, and they want to talk to you. And I thought, okay, well, you know what? Air Force wouldn't be so bad. I would dig on, flying planes.
Right, right.
And then, but in order to go to the high school that had the Air Force Junior ROTC, I would have to get a zone variance. And then I found out I was going to be ineligible for sports for a year. And I was like, okay, well, that's out of the question.
Right.
And then I thought about the Navy, and I was just like, you know what? My dad was in the Navy. I had two cousins that were in the Navy. They were both pretty screwed. They were all screwed up people.
Right.
And
right.
I was like, all right, well, I'm not going to go that route.
Mm-hmm.
And it's actually kind of funny. This guy that I knew, he went and enlisted in the Marine Corps. And
when? What year was this? Well, okay. You just go ahead and keep telling your story then.
And so, unknowingly, he had given the recruiter my phone number.
Uh-huh.
So he called me and he's like, so what are your plans? I'm like, well, my plan was to get a scholarship playing football this year. I said, but, due to injuries, that didn't happen. He's like, so what's your plan now? I said, to be honest with you, I said, I don't know. And he's like, well, would you like to come in and, just sit down and talk with me? And I'm like, all right. So we set up an appointment, and I was hanging out with my buddies, and they were like, I'm like, I got to go. And they're like, where are you going to go? And I'm like, I got to go talk to this recruiter. And they're like, well, hang on a second, So one of them breaks out a joint, and he's like, here, let's smoke before you go. And I'm like, all right, whatever. So I go down there, and the guy was really cool. And he's like, well, I'd like to give you our screening test just to see where you are mentally,
right.
So we can set up your ASVAB appointment if you decide to do this.
Right.
So, and I remember it was like 20 questions, and they gave you 15 minutes to do the test. Well, I finished up 5 minutes early and only missed 2 questions.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, holy shit, we got to get you down to take your ASVAB,
right.
And I'm thinking, okay, well, I'm stoned and I only missed 2 questions. How dumb are the people you've been talking to?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so he's like, all right, well, let's do this. And I'm like, all right. And so on my way home, I stopped and saw another buddy of mine and told him about it. And he's like, well, shit, dude. He goes, I'll go with you. I'll enlist with you.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm like, are you serious? And he's like, hell yeah. And I'm like, all right. So he goes down and we both get set up. We go take our ASVAB test. And when they got the scores back, the recruiter looked at me. He's like, well, he goes, you scored well enough. You tell me what you want to do.
Right.
And so we went through the whole thing, and I told my mom, I said, look, I was a week away from my 18th birthday, and the recruiter told me, he's like, well, I'm going to need both your parents to sign off on your enlistment,
right?
Because you're under 18. And I was like, oh, great, my dad's an asshole. I haven't spoken to him in years. This is going to go over great, So I called my mom from work, and I was like, I decided I'm going to go in the military, and I need you to sign my enlistment papers.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, oh, did you decide on the Army? And I was like, no. She goes, did you Navy? And I'm like, no. She goes, oh, please, God, don't tell me you chose the Marines. And only because she knows what my uncle went through. And I said, yeah, that's what I want to do. And she goes, I don't know. And I point blank told her, I said, look, Mom, I'm going to be 18 in a week. Either you sign the papers for me now, or I'll sign them myself. Either way, I'm going to go. Anything I've done in my life, I've always tried to be the best of whatever it is that I was doing.
Right.
And at that point, I thought, you know what? My Uncle Dave was a huge role model for me. And I'm like, you know what? If he was able to do it, and got through the worst of it, then that's what I want to do. I want to be a part of the best. And that's how I wound up there. And that's the thing that kept me going through boot camp. Because as you know, the first 72 hours you're there and you're, sleep deprived and everything else, the first thing that runs through your head is, what in the hell have I done to myself?
Yeah.
But
now, are you said you're in Vegas now, so are you a Hollywood Marine, or
yes. Yes, I was born and raised in Vegas and a Hollywood Marine.
Oh, well, I'm sorry. That's okay. We love you anyway. But I got my when I filled out my dream sheet, I didn't know anything about the Marine Corps. I got pregnant in high school, so I dropped out after 2 years. So I was never recruited. I didn't even think the Marine Corps took women. I was really fit, so I have what I call the Keegan tree trunk legs, very muscular legs. So when I went in, you don't get weight waivers in boot camp. So I was a weight recruit for 13 weeks. So, I mean, it's like telling a girl she's fat, and, that's just, oh my God. And so when I got out, I was a nervous wreck, and I went and gained 20 pounds, like, while I was on leave. But the point is, after I graduated DINFOS, my tech school, when I filled out my dream sheet, I said, Iwakuni, Marine Corps base, Japan, Okinawa, whatever. It's anything, away. Because part of why you join is to see other things. Right. I get orders back to Parris Island. I cried. Not very marinely, but I cried, because that's where the bad people are. But it turned out to be an amazing duty station. It was really great. But
it's completely different once you're a member of the fleet. Oh, at that point, you're one of them, and they respect you.
Yes. Well, and yes, the weirdest thing ever was when I first got back there, and recruits like, by your leave, ma'am. I'm like, ma'am, what? It's like this. Yeah. So anyway, okay. So, all right. So keep on with your story here.
So,
did you choose your job before? Okay, first of all, back to the question I asked earlier, and I'm sorry, I know I interrupted you. What year did you join?
1986.
Okay, so you went in just a little bit before I did. I went in at the end of '89. So okay.
Yeah, I actually signed my papers February 10th of 1986, exactly 1 week before my birthday.
Yeah. Okay. That's awesome. Okay. All right. So keep going.
So me and my buddy, we both get sent off to MEPS for our physicals, and of course, during the course of going through that whole process, you get separated. Mm-hmm. Well, I finished up my physical and, went through and did my initial swear in and everything else. And then I finally meet up with him later on, and I asked him, are you done? Are you good? And he's like, they won't let me in. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And when we were in high school, he broke his ankle. Uh-huh. And he still had the pin in his ankle. So the doctor wouldn't sign off on him.
Right.
And so he told him, well, if you get the pin out, mm-hmm. we can reevaluate this. We can revisit this. So I'm like, you got to be shitting me, dude. I've already signed my papers and taken my oath and everything, and now you're telling me you can't? And I stayed the course, and I left that September, and my friend for literally a year tried going back, trying to go in, and the doctors wouldn't sign off on it, and he wound up going in the Air Force. Wow. But I mean, this is a guy that I'd been friends with since 7th grade, and we're still friends to this day. Mm-hmm. He's one of my best friends, and he went in first, and then it was his brother and his sister. They followed him in the Air Force.
That's awesome. Yeah, and that's the thing. And we talk about the inter-service rivalry and all, but the thing is, everybody has a job. Everybody, and we need every one of them, and we love every one of them. And even within the even within your own branch, there are, again, we have support roles, and we have, and when I first started marketing Hero Harbor on Instagram, I had some guy, it was a Marine too, was giving me his hard time he was calling me a pogue and whatever. And I said, look, there are all different kinds of pogues. And there was at least one other guy who chimed in, and they're like, talking about, because they were bullet stoppers, they were grunts, and they're like, we don't need the legit da 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 da. It's like, dude, you don't fight naked with your hands, everything. But the point is that we all of our jobs are necessary, and there's some of us who are cut out to be, war people. There are, and to handle that kind of thing. And there are people who are not. And we need, if everybody was a trained killer, or, had that mentality, and that's not what I was getting at. What I was trying to say is, if we could only hire, recruit trained killers, or people with that mentality, we'd be screwed, because there wouldn't be, we wouldn't have enough people. So, all right. So so tell me what your job was, and tell me how you ended up with that job.
I ended up being assigned as a 1371, a combat engineer. Mm-hmm. When I was choosing my occupation, I told my recruiter, I'm like, look, I want to do something. I want to work in the NBC field, because at that time the Cold War was still rolling hard. Mm-hmm. Obviously, we have the test site here, and I'm like, let me do something that will benefit me. For when I get out, I'll go work at the test site.
Right.
And being 18 and dumb and not knowing how things work in that whole aspect, he's like, okay, well, we can do that. So I wrote down on my sheet, NBC and whatever the MOS was. Right. He said, and he goes, now, and write down this. So I wrote down the MOS for Amtrak. I wrote down the MOS for combat engineer, and like 3 others.
Right.
So here in my mind, I'm thinking, I'm getting NBC.
Right.
Well, that's not the fact. They look at the MOSs and then go, which field is short? Which field do they need people in?
Right.
And I told him, I said, all right, well, just so you understand, I said, I don't want to be the guy, I said, I'm all for this.
Right.
I'm all in. But I don't want to be the one hitting the beach first and and he's like, oh, no. So, the last week of boot camp, when they tell you what your MOS is going to be, I remember my recruiter or my drill instructor telling me, 1371 combat engineer, and I'm like, there's a mistake. He goes, what do you mean there's a mistake? They don't make mistakes. It says right here, combat engineer, guaranteed. And I'm like, what the fuck just happened? And then I'm like, okay, I'll accept it, whatever. I'm here for the ride. Then it turns out that my job was, I was the first one. I was the first one ahead of everybody.
You flick your fist or whatever, so that we can make sure they get there. Yeah.
So when they said, well, basically you're a grunt with a shovel, I'm like, all right, I can live with that. And then I found out, what do you mean? Wait a minute. Don't like the special ops guys and everything going first? And they're like, oh no, you go first. And I'm like, oh crap. And they're like, the life expectancy for a combat engineer in a combat zone is like less than 2 minutes. And I'm like, thanks for telling me that. I can look forward to that.
And that's how, I in retrospect now know how incredibly lucky I got. As I said, I joined, I was only going to join the branch that, I was a photographer. I was 23 when I went in. I was a photographer. I wanted to remain a photographer. So my recruiter, and again, we don't know what these numbers mean for, it's like, okay. And so he puts down 3 different things. And I got, when I found out what my job was, it was PAO. and I was a writer and a photographer. But what I learned later is that the three he'd put down, one was public affairs, which I think was 4321 maybe. Public affairs, the I don't know what they call them, but basically it's the photographers the historical photographers, the ones who shoot the daggum, promotions and, just the boring stuff as far as I'm concerned. But the third one was repro. Like, I would have been spending 4 years doing photocopies. Holy crap. Yeah. So I'd have probably gone, my life would have been very different. Yeah. So, okay. Yeah. So that was my story. Oh, and by the way, speaking of recruiters and such, and when I was talking to each of the branches, the Air Force told me, you just have to want the Air Force. And I don't remember if it was the Army or the Navy. They said, well, let's see what happens when you get to MEPS. I'm like, you saw my score. Do I look stupid? It's like, you're going to get me down there, and again, like you said, they're going to put you in whatever's available, and I'm going to be a cook or a skivvy sorter or no. Anyway, so Marine Corps chose me, and it was perfect. It was a perfect fit.
Yeah. A lot of my friends weren't all that surprised.
Right.
Like I said, my dad was an asshole. He was a mean drunk, and growing up, I took the brunt of it all because I was the boy and I was always big for my size.
Right.
And so I was always the one that was looking to get into fights when I was a kid. Even if it had nothing to do with me, if one of my friends said, "Hey, this guy is messing with me,"
well, you're a protector too. That's part of it.
Or said something to my girlfriend, I'm like, "Who is it? Let's go," And so I already kind of had that mentality that, you know what, just give me the information that I need. I'll take care of it.
Right.
And, to take an 18-year-old kid and who's already has the propensity for violence, and they go, okay, well, maybe this will calm you down a little bit.
Right.
All they did was they took.
They give you a license to kill now.
Exactly. What they did was they taught me how to do it better.
Right.
Be proficient at it.
Right.
And to block out any type of emotion.
Right.
And everybody thought that, okay, well, when you get out, that'll change. Once you're back to normal life, that'll change.
There is no life after you've served. There isn't.
It isn't. And people always, they always would give me a hard time saying, well, I think they brainwashed you, and because you weren't the same guy you were when you left. And I tell my friends all the time, no, I'm not the same person. You don't understand. Physically I am. I said mentally, I'm not. I'm in a different mindset now.
But you succeeded when you succeeded in the Marine Corps because you were already of that. You were the type of person who could do that before you went in. And that's a common thread. What I was going to say is that, and this is we succeed. It's a certain type of person who joins the military anyway. And whether they realize it or not, and to succeed or excel, you have a drive a different mentality. And so it's both good and bad, but
Absolutely.
What I've found numerous times, especially with my conversations with Marines, is that, and one of my Army guys too, we say we're unemployable. Either I quit or they fire me. And Rick says, he said, I'm a terrible boss. He says, he said, I cuss myself out and everything else. He said, but now I can do that. And, it's acceptable. Whereas I couldn't cuss out my boss before. But the point is that
you are a different kind of person when you went in than your friends. You just didn't know it. And the Marine Corps kind of molded that, so to speak. And you hear people talk about joining to get discipline or joining to get this. I don't think that we might get direction. We got direction from serving, but what I've said is that, and I only came to this realization recently, what I got more than anything that many civilians don't have is that passion for our country, that patriotism, that understanding of what it means when you say freedom isn't free. Those are words to most people. But we really get that, and I didn't go through near the stuff that a lot of, these men and women have gone through. But yeah, and so you were already different than your friends. You just didn't know how. And then it molded you in a way and it sort of polished, that person. And it's a good thing. It's a challenge. And that's something I would like for you to talk about too, because I still want to find, get the rest of the path through the Marine Corps. But I want to hear you talk about when you got out, that, what it was like, that experience going from being in uniform to, and to being ordinary again. Right. So anyway, go ahead, keep going.
And being, a city kid, mm-hmm. You don't get the exposure to do things that a lot of the guys that you meet got to do when they were kids, go hunting, this and that. So, I mean, for me to be given a rifle at the age of 18 and saying, this is how you use it, this is how you become proficient with it. And for me to shoot high expert from the time I'm in boot camp throughout mm-hmm. my career, was one of my biggest prides.
Right.
Yeah,
unfortunately,
when I would come home and tell my buddies, I qualified expert. Mm-hmm. But what does that mean?
Right.
I said that means I can put a bullet square in a gnat's ass at 500 yards.
I love it. Yeah. I will wear a pizza box, unfortunately, forever. I never, ever, ever qualified first time through. I'm actually much better with a handgun, but yeah, I never. Who knows? I don't know if it was. In fact, I have a picture of me hooked up to one of those training machines where they've got. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but yeah. So I'm sitting cross-legged, and my range coach or whatever is there trying to. It's like, so I'm on a freaking machine trying to learn to shoot. I mean, forever in it. I will always wear the pizza box. I can't say very proudly, but it's a good thing for everyone that I shot pictures rather than guns. So anyway, that's, but anyway.
So, like I said, that was one of my biggest prides. And that's the thing that I always strive for was, mm-hmm. if this is going to be something that is potentially going to be the difference between me going home or the other person going home, it's going to be me.
Right.
By any means.
Right.
And, eventually the last year and a half, 2 years I was in the unit that I was with, they asked me if I would be interested in being a marksmanship coach for our unit. Mm-hmm. And I was like, hell yeah. This is awesome, because now I can yell and say whatever I want to the senior NCOs and officers. Because on the range there is no rank. They can't. They have no leverage on you.
Yeah.
And it was, if you want to qualify, you'll do what the hell I say.
Right.
Shut your mouth. Listen to what I'm telling you. And when it was my turn, we always get to the 500-yard line, and I always made sure I was next to my friends. And I'm like, all right, a buck a headshot. And they're like, all right. And 9 times out of 10, I walked away with $15-20 in my pocket.
I love it. So I have to tell you, so my dad was Air Force, but he's a really good shot. And he used to ham it up because he was a prison guard for a while too. And when they would go to qualify, they were not supposed to do headshots. It was just, but because he was so good, he would do, and they'd fuss at him, but he did it anyway. And so when after I got out of the Marine Corps, I went to visit him, and he was so excited to take his Marine daughter to meet his supervisor and get out on the range, right? I embarrassed the shit out of him. I was like, Dad, you really don't want to do this. I'm telling you, you don't want to do this. And he was like, whatever, it's, again, I have many talents, but shooting is not one of them. So anyway.
So yeah, got through boot camp, and then they sent me to Camp Lejeune for school. Mm-hmm. And I was there for about 3 months. Mm-hmm. And of course, I was there at the coldest possible time of the year. It was January through March, and it was just miserable. Couldn't wait to get out of there. And they're like, okay, where do you want to go? I put West Coast, West Coast, West Coast. They sent me so far west, I wound up east, and I wound up in Okinawa. Yeah.
And so again, as I said before we started recording, I got the exact opposite. I begged for Okinawa or anywhere else, and they sent me back to Parris Island. So and again, that's another thing too, is you join in order to to see things. And they sent me, my tech school was in Indianapolis. Well, both of my brothers and my dad, they were all born in Indianapolis. So it's like that wasn't new to me. And then they sent me back to Parris Island. I'm like, hello, folks. I was able to volunteer out of Parris Island and go to Desert Storm and take part in that. And then my last year was in Okinawa. But yeah, it's like, come on, where's the new here? But anyway, so okay, keep going.
Yeah. So I did my year over there. Of course, I was there probably.
Were you stationed up north? Hanson, Schwab, Courtney.
Hanson.
Yes. So okay. Well, that was before I went in, because my last year I was Northern Bureau Chief, so I covered Courtney, Hanson, Schwab, and in the NTA. But in fact, and this is the funniest thing. Again, we talk, and this is part of the reason that Marines are it's instant camaraderie. You and I have never spoken, never met, but it's just an automatic love. But we've crossed paths. But I met somebody, a Marine, a while back, who he graduated boot camp at Parris Island while I was stationed there. So there's a good possibility I covered his graduation. And then he was stationed on Camp Hansen at the same time I was. So obviously I never met him, but somehow we crossed paths. And the Marine Corps is a very small place. It really is.
It is.
But anyway, so Hansen, that's cool. Awesome. Very nice.
And I remember, being when I was a young kid, seeing all the different, protests and everything else, and I always thought, well, that had to do with Vietnam. Mm-hmm. We were protesting because obviously they were all baby killers and whatever other bullshit that they were spewing,
right?
And so I never thought anything about it, and then here it is, modern day 1987. And you got the same exact thing going on, people.
But do you understand why, though, right? In the case of the Okinawans, you understand why they were protesting, right?
I didn't then.
Right.
I do now.
Yeah, I mean, I've actually found myself defending the Okinawans after coming back, because I've had people saying, oh, they hate Americans. It's like, no, they don't. I said, but you have to take into consideration that Okinawa was not Japanese. Okinawa was its own, independent, their own country, their own language, everything. Japan comes in, subjugates them.
Right.
When we get into the war, we bomb the crap out of Okinawa. There's a place there called Sugar Hill because we bombed it into dust. Mm-hmm. And so, again, the Japanese took away their language. They made them now speak Japanese and so on. So, first they're subjugated by them, and then we come in and we do all this, and then we stay. And so it's not that they hate us, but they're very peaceful people, very 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 passive. And so most of the violent crime is caused by Americans there, yes. And the American military, and we're noisy. We're very noisy. Our firing is noisy. Our planes are noisy, you know, and so they've just had, so it's not that they hate Americans, they want their country back, you know, and,
Right.
and that's perfectly understandable. I mean,
Right.
I get that. So,
Yeah,
but
when you're 19, you don't understand.
oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You know, and it's the same thing for them. I keep saying I had the best job, hands down, the best job in the Marine Corps. And so I was able to, interact with them with translators and things like that. I have in my bedroom, I have they're like 3 foot, the most beautiful calligraphy or whatever, however you want to call it. I don't know what they're anyway, ninth engineers, they were refurbishing a bridge and at a leper colony. And so this leper, he had no fingers and all, but he painted these things for me. So it's it was amazing. And so, yeah, it's not that they hate Americans. They just want peace. And that's
right.
But yeah, no, I hear you at 18, 19. And I don't know that it was an epiphany later, but anyway, okay.
So
protests.
So I'm there, 3-4 months, and then they're like, okay, well, we're gonna go do this operation in Korea. Okay, great. I'm thinking, we're gonna go for a couple weeks, maybe a month, and we get all of our prep done, and get on the C-130, fly to Korea. And I'm like, okay, this isn't so bad, Put us on, the Korean charter buses, I guess. And I'm like, okay, well, hell, where are we going to stay at? What hotel are we staying at? And we drive through the night, and we wind up out in the middle of no man's land. I mean, there's like nothing. Nothing but hills and shrubs.
Oh.
And they're like, all right, this is home. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me.
Hotel hooch, right?
Right. And 21 days until we got our first shower, and I was like, oh my God, this cannot be healthy. But it wound up, being a good experience. When we finished up with what we had to do, my unit actually took on the project of building an actual culvert with a roadway over it, over this riverbed, because before they were, their ox and their wooden carts, just kind of like trudging through it. And, it was pretty cool. I got to, I volunteered to go to one of the orphanages there, did some stuff for the orphans, and, it was quite the experience.
Right.
So, but when it was time, when they said, okay, well, you're rotating back to the States, and I'm like, sweet, where am I going? And I'm thinking, please let it be West Coast. Please let it be West Coast. And they're like, you're going to Pendleton. And I'm like, all right,
as far west as you can get.
Right. And, and I was actually kind of hoping Barstow, because that's like
right
midway. That's
right.
halfway between home and Pendleton.
Right.
But no, I took Pendleton, and I had a great experience there. Made a lot of good friends.
Since my last year was in Okinawa, I out-processed at Pendleton. I spent 30 days working at the stables there, shoveling horse manure.
Yeah, I spent most of my time near the base headquarters in Maine side. I got assigned to 7th Engineers, and I guess I stood out in the short period of time that I was there. They made me, as a Lance Corporal, they made me the embark NCO, and I'm like, wait a minute, I'm a Lance Corporal, and I'm supposed to be telling these guys that have been in longer and got more rank than me what to do. And they're like, yeah.
That's funny.
So,
But you had practice at it by now, from after being was that before or after? That was before before you became a firearms.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so all right, okay, never mind.
And so
timeline.
I did a good enough job that they decided, okay, well, they've got a battalion level promotion board coming up, and we want you to be on it. Mm-hmm. So instead of doing my job, I'd go to work, and my job was drilling, marching the guys in my unit around and studying. And the company gunny that I had, him and I knocked heads from the get-go. And so in the meantime, they asked for volunteers. Who wants to go to the 15th MEU? And I'm like, depends. Where
who's not military, MEU is Marine Expedition Unit, or
right.
Expeditionary. Yeah. All right. So, yeah.
So I'm like, depends. Where are they going? And the gunny that had come over, he's like, well, we hit Australia this year. They're scheduled to hit Australia again. I'm like, I'm in.
Yeah. No doubt.
I may not come back. I'm in. And so they're like, are you serious? And I'm like, yeah, I'll go. And at that time, they decided to make it a company level promotion. Well, the gunny told the battalion, I don't have anybody to promote. Because at that time, now I had changed units. Instead of forwarding it, he's like, I got nobody to promote. So I wound up getting it, time and grade, time and service anyway. But I was like, okay, this is the first raw deal I've had since I've been in.
Yeah, the guys I've interviewed call it the big green weenie. So yeah.
Yeah, and so I went over and made a lot of great friends. I regretted it. I was regretting my choice at first because I spent 2.5, 3 weeks of every month out in the field. And if it wasn't out in the field, yeah, if you weren't in the field, you were on a ship, and it all paid off.
Right.
At that point they decided to go a certain way with the Marine Expeditionary units. Now, instead of just being a Marine Expeditionary Unit, they were Marine Expeditionary Unit Special Operations Capable Command.
Nice. Uh-huh.
Now you're doing more special ops type stuff.
Right.
And they decided to designate, like, from my understanding, it was like their first actual designated hostage rescue team type thing. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, sounds fun. I'm in, I'll do it. So basically, if anything were to happen during our deployment where, there's an embassy is being under siege or whatever, part of my job was to go in and evacuate civilians and diplomats.
Right.
Pure. That's all we did. Mm-hmm. And during that time, we sat off the coast of Burma for like a week. Mm-hmm. I was like, all right, gonna get my shot here,
Right.
And things ended up changing, but yeah, it was a great experience. Got to experience WOG Day, mm-hmm. which is something from what I understand, they don't do that anymore. Mm-hmm. And it's a shame because it's a tradition.
Mm-hmm. I'm not familiar with it. What is it?
WOG Day is, so the Navy has what they call shellbacks.
Mm-hmm.
These are guys that have crossed the equator.
Mm-hmm.
If you haven't crossed the equator, you're still a pollywog,
Right.
a tadpole.
Right.
So when you cross the equator, they have what they call Wog Day. Anybody who hasn't been across the equator yet, it's a day long of hazing.
Right.
Literally getting your ass beat, getting
Right.
degraded, and everything else. And, you know, I hated it at the time, but afterwards, I still have my shellback card that I carry in my wallet today, you know, and it was a great experience, and it's just a shame that they don't allow that anymore. You know?
Yeah, there is, you know, and it's, I mean, there certainly has to be some change. I mean, you know, with my job at Paris Island, you know, one of the things we did was we would, when we'd have old timers come and tour the place, we'd escort them around. We escorted the media, civilian media, and escort. Anyway, I remember some of these guys, like the World War II vets and stuff, talking about smoking buckets. So, you know, back during Vietnam, you know, where a disciplinary act would be putting a bucket over your head and making you smoke a pack of cigarettes. Now, there's no way in hell they would do that now. So there's some things that have to change. But you're right, a softer, kinder core is not, you know, there's a reason that these people survive, you know, heinous things, is because they've been taught that, you know, you can go through so much and survive it. And so, you know, it's, I have no doubt. And because the thing too is going through that, because, you know, they were not going to let you die. And so you come out of it with much more confidence, much more. It's like, I can handle whatever they throw at me. And that is vital. That is vital, because you want men and women who, when the shit hits the fan, they got it. They're together. They can handle it. And you know, they need that mentality. They're not crapping themselves, you know? Right. So, you know, yes,
and you know, going back to when I went through boot camp, you know, my battalion was one of the last battalions that went through where the drill instructors still were able to do the old drill instructor stuff.
Right.
You know, and then I find out, well, they're not allowed to talk about your mom. They can't say bad stuff about your sister.
Yes. Right.
You know, they can't put their hands on you. And I'm like, wait a minute.
Right.
These are people that you're expecting to be able to just flip a switch and take a life without question, with no emotion, without second thought. And now you're going to coddle them.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is just, it's asinine, you know. And I'm like, you know, the mothers of America have ruined the Marine Corps, because they send all these letters to the congressman. Poor little Johnny is being, you know, the drill instructors are being mean to him.
Yeah, I had a stepbrother who decided that he was, what you think, just a simple aside or a quick aside, it's like, I mean, how much different are the poor drill instructors' jobs right now? I mean, when we went in, we didn't have cell phones, didn't have email, you didn't have parents, you know, it's like you didn't have to deal with that stuff. I can't imagine. But anyway, I had a stepbrother who, now this is after I'd, you know, gotten out. I'm both a Marine and a war veteran and everything else. He's a pompous idiot anyway, and he decided he was going to join, and his mother had coddled him all his life, so he decided he was going to join Army Reserve. And she calls me one day, and he is washed out. Well, I think this is before he washed out. Either way, you know, he's calling her and crying and all, and he ends up washing out anxiety. But she asked me, you know, and I'm one of these people, I don't want to hurt your feelings. And, you know, she's my stepmother. I don't want to, you know, and she was a good woman. I cared about her. But anyway, she's like, why do they have to be so hard on him? And I'm kind of trying to gather myself, and I'm thinking, okay, you're asking a Marine, war veteran, why? It's like, because you're training them to not get fucking killed, you know? It's like, how can you not get that? You know, there are just some things that cannot be soft pedal. They just can't. It's necessary, you know. Now, again, like I said, some change is absolutely important, but yes, I mean, but again, it's the difference. Being hard on them in a controlled environment is the difference between life and death when they get out there in an uncontrollable environment,
Right.
So
Absolutely. I agree 100%. You going through high school and you play sports and you go through Hell Week and you're like, oh my God, this sucks.
right.
I think I'm just going to stay home tomorrow,
Right.
But then you learn that the body is capable of doing so much more that.
And then it becomes sort of a challenge. It's like, how far can I push myself now?
Right. You can't let your mind control your body. It's a game. If you let your mind dictate how you're going to react or how you're going to perform, you're doomed.
Well, the flip side to that is your mind is so powerful that if you say I can do this, then you can. Right. So it's your mind is part of it.
Even if you fail,
mm-hmm.
even if you fail, you're continuing to try.
Right.
You're at that point. Now it becomes an obsession. There's
right.
no way I'm not going to let this beat me.
Right.
And you learn that you're never out of the fight. No matter what, you keep pushing. You keep pushing. No matter how tired you are, you keep pushing.
Well, and this is something, this is a large part of why Hero Harbor was created, is because these are things that civilians don't understand. This is a mindset that they don't understand. And again, it's not just Marines. Marines are a special kind of crazy. I've said that repeatedly. Right. But all these men and women, or a significant number of them, most of them, military, and again, firefighters, police, we're a different breed. And so, as I said earlier, and this may have been before we started recording, I was saying that I'm unemployable. I quit or they fire me because I'm a problem solver. I'm driven to make things better. And for me, every situation is about, okay, can I solve this problem? And if I can't, what do I need to do to adapt to function within this environment that I have no control over? Right. But it's weird. It's a different mindset. So that's what for so many of us makes it really challenging once we get out. Part of it is I'm a Marine. I don't, because like we go through those classes and stuff. It's like, I'm a Marine. I don't need that stuff. It's like, just give me my damn civvies, right? Right. But then we get out and we have no idea how it's going to impact us. How all of a sudden you've taken off this uniform and you are very different, but you look like everyone else. And as you said, there's things that you can't talk about. There's things that you don't know how to talk. There's people just give you that look, and and so that's a large part of why we built this, is to give our heroes that platform to. And anyway, but yeah, it's very, very, very different.
And during my last deployment, now in 4 years' time, I got sent. I deployed probably 5-6 different times.
Mm-hmm.
Just okay. Well, your billet is something that we need, so you're gonna go. And during our last deployment, we were in Thailand, and my squad was given the assignment of doing a night patrol with mine sweeping.
Mm-hmm.
And so we went out and we did what we had to do. We were expecting some sort of contact at some point in time, just to
right.
see how everyone's going to react.
Right.
And we're about 3/4 of the way back in and still hadn't had any contact.
Mm-hmm.
And off to the side there was a building, and it had like a bright, like those high lumens
mm-hmm.
security lights on the corner.
Right.
Well, the platoon sergeant that I had again, him and I just knocked heads from the time he got put with our unit to the time I got out.
Right.
He said, all right, well, stay this course. And I tried telling him, look, that light's going to silhouette us. As soon as, if anybody's out here, as soon as we walk into that light, we're done. And he's like, I said, we're going this way. I outrank you. And he's like, if you don't, first chance I get, I'm going to hit you with insubordination because I'm giving you an order.
Right.
Well, being 3 months away from being discharged, I'm like, you know what? Fuck it. I don't need the headaches.
Right.
I'll do what you say. And sure as shit, as soon as my squad got inside the perimeter of that light, I mean, the darkness just lit up with gunfire, And afterwards, when we got back, I told him, I said, you're lucky this was just training. I said, if it wasn't training, I said, you'd be writing letters to all of our parents explaining why we're dead and why you're such a fucking idiot.
Right. If he had made it, for that matter,
Yeah. And so things just got even more tense between him and I. At that point, now he was looking to hang anything he could on me, just to make an example.
Right.
And I didn't know how. It seems like something so insignificant, but I didn't realize the impact of that particular situation had on me. When we got back to the States, a week after we got back to the States, they started pulling guys from my unit for Desert Shield.
Mm-hmm.
I was already in the process of final checkout.
Right.
And of course, my buddies are like, just extend for a year, man. Come with us. This is what.
Yeah, I'm surprised that they even gave you a choice, because we had guys who I remember one guy in particular was a corporal, I believe. I mean, his vehicle was packed and everything else, and they canceled his orders. They're like, no.
That's what I was expecting.
Right.
And I told him, I said, look, if they cancel my orders, I'm all yours.
Right.
But if they don't say anything,
right. Yeah.
I'm out. I said, as well as I
got 4 years of inactive reserve anyway. They still had their hand around your throat. I mean, right. you'd have gone back. So.
Exactly. And I told my buddy, I'm like, look, I extend for a year. As well as I do, this shit will be over in 3 months, and I'll be stuck here for another 9 months.
Right.
And I was like, I love you more than you know, but my family, my friends are like, you've been gone so much, you've deployed so many times, you've done your part, just come home.
Right.
And I wish I would never listened to him.
Yeah.
I actually had reenlistment papers drawn up. I was going to reenlist. I was actually going to change MOSs completely, go a completely different route, and go to the intelligence side. I was going to reenlist to be an interrogator and translator.
Right.
And they're like, you've done your part. It's time to come home.
Yeah.
And so.
And I understand both sides. I understand. Yeah. I mean, that the same way. The only thing, I don't have any of my uniforms. I have my combat boots, and that's it. That's the only thing. I was so ready to get out. And despite loving my job and everything else, I was ready. But I'm the same way. There's part of me that says, I wish I had stayed. But
I got out, and I stayed in. You got to remember, this is before there was internet and email and everything else. So I got out, and every so often, I would call back to the barracks and talk. My one buddy, him and I were best friends, and we actually reconnected a couple of years ago. And I'd call him back and see how things were going, and I'll never forget my last day, the day that I left. I had to go to the company office, and of course the lieutenant and everybody, they were on leave, so it was, Staff Sergeant Torres. He was left in charge, and he's like, "Hey man, it's been great. We had a lot of good times, we had a lot of bad times, but it was great working with you." And he's like, "I wish you all the best," and signed my papers. And the sergeant that I had that was an idiot, Sergeant Frank, he's like, he goes, "You got anything you want to say to Mr. Moon before he leaves?"
Right.
And he's like, "No, I don't have anything to say." So I looked at him, I'm like, "Can I say something?" He goes, "You can say whatever you want. You're a civilian now. You can say whatever you want." So I turned and looked at him. I said, "You should be happy that I've chosen to get out and stay in." I said, "Because had you and I deployed one more time together," I said, "you probably would have been the first fucker that I'd frag, because you're a danger to people. Your ego is so huge. You think you know better than anybody, and you don't want to listen." And so I left, and like I said, from time to time I would call back, and I'd be like, "So how's things going? How's Trini treating you guys? Is he still busting your balls, or what's going on?" He's like, "To be honest, dude," he goes, "ever since you left, he's been like really, really mellow with us. He doesn't write us like he did."
Something you said resonated. Yeah.
And I said, "That's interesting." He goes, "Why?" I said, "Because," I said, "it's probably because he's afraid that you guys are going to deploy together.
Right.
And somebody out there is going to take him out." I said, "Because I told him my last day, right before I left, that it would happen."
Right. Oh, wow.
And
all right. So I've got a couple of questions. First of all, and this is, did you get? I'm curious if you got the same in-country briefing. Okay, so you went to Okinawa when?
1987.
Okay, so 87. I went at the end of 92. So did you get an in-country briefing about the banana shows?
Yes.
Of course, this is a room full of Marines, both male and female, and what they said to us. They said, good news is, he says, many of you have, parents who, were here in other wars, this, that. And he says, you've probably heard about the banana shows. He said, the good news is they still have the banana shows. The bad news is it's the same women doing them. Like, oh my God. But anyway, yeah. So I was curious if they, those many years apart. I wonder if they're still saying that. I wonder if that's just something that's been passed from one to another.
Probably.
That was another thing. I had, because I was stationed at Hanson, I had Kenville, patrol periodically, and I was out there one night. It was me and the Lance Corporal who worked for me, with me, whatever. And he, of course, I'm female, he's male, he was male, and we get out there and they have a cat house, and there's these guys lined up outside the cat house. Well, of course, as soon as they see me, they just get embarrassed as crap. I'm like, guys, I couldn't care less. I mean,
right.
Personal opinion is that it should be legal here. Give the girls health care and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, right. It was funny. So okay, so one of the things I was going to ask you is your Instagram, and I think also within the app, because you're in the app, right? Mm-hmm. The servers were down. That was what you were asking me. Servers were down, and he was still stuck at work just recently. Again, the hazards of bootstrap startup.
Right.
It was something he couldn't fix from where he was. But anyway, Recon Medic. Where does that come from?
When I was with the 15th MU. Mm-hmm. When they decided to make this specialty rescue team, mm-hmm. We were attached to the recon units that was assigned to the 15th MU. Mm-hmm. So that's where that comes from. Mm-hmm. The medic, I became a paramedic after my time in the Corps, about 9 years later.
So you're a double hero. Thank you for that.
I got out, and of course I wanted to be a cop. Everybody wants to be a cop, and at that time you'd have 300 people testing for, 2 positions. And
Right.
after a while, I got very disheartened about it and said, screw it, fuck them. I don't, I grew up here and, I've got this background, what's the issue? So I'm like, all right, well, maybe the fire department, same thing.
Right.
And again, I was working for an emergency service here in Vegas. I had a background with SCBAs and everything else. Born and raised here, scored off the charts on the written test, passed the physical agility, went through the oral boards, made the hiring list, and that's where it ended. And so I got very sour on the fire department too.
Yeah.
I'm like, I passed all the psych screenings and everything else. What is wrong? And so during my time as a paramedic, I got to know one of the guys that here in town that he's the coroner up in Washington. I can't remember exactly where he went, but I decided I wanted to be a coroner investigator. So I applied and went through the screening and went through the academy, and that's what I did part-time. If I wasn't picking up extra shifts as a medic or teaching a class at the college, I was working as a coroner investigator. So, I was...
Thank you for spending this time with us. If you enjoyed the content we shared with you, please subscribe, review, and share this show with your friends. Veramore, the dating app, and Hero Harbor, the social connection tool for heroes, are both in the app stores. You can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter as Veramore, Veramore_app, or Hero Harbor.